It's the last week of January and we've had a fall of snow. So I thought I'd bring you into the Faery wood. This is the Faery wood. There were three, or there will be three, woodlands here. There'll be Healy Wood, which will be our main food and fuel forest. It's not easy to say with these teeth. There is the Arboretum, which is up to the south of me. And this is Faery wood. Most of this was here when we bought the property. So I'm going to step down, so you might get a bit seasick as I go down the step into the wood. But as you can see, most of these trees are quite mature and they were here long before we were. I do think originally this may have been a vegetable plot, but most of what you're seeing here, we've been gradually filling this gully up and it stretches back. If I go very carefully, it goes back up and used to drain from the side of the bothy and the cottage, but that has long since been replaced. I come back round slowly by what is just there, which is Middledyke. If I walk over, it's really rather pretty, and that's Middledyke. Middledyke runs down to Merrymeet Mead below the Faery wood, and on then into the drain at the bottom, down to the street drain and on to the river below. However, on our land, it drains between the cottage and the bothy, so this drain became redundant and was just left to silt up, and I think probably had rubbish thrown in it. And certainly, if we go back to the path, I might not trip over so easily. That would be more sensible, wouldn't it? Certainly this area has had a lot of rubbish thrown into it. Traditionally, these little cottages never had a dustbin. Who did? They threw their rubbish into a pit, it rotted away, off we went again. And that worked when they had paper bags and natural string and wool clothes. But unfortunately, they carried on doing it, not realising that modern plastics don't rot away. That tree is an alder. It came down in one of the summer storms, but as it's not really anywhere that's doing anybody any harm, we're just leaving it to gently collapse into the ground and provide habitat where it is. And it marks the edge of the Faery wood really, because beyond that is quite a scrubby bit that will be cleared to make a lawned area. But I will show you something else we discovered. What we're looking at here, it looks just like a tangle of brambles and nonsense. But in actual fact, in amongst there's a whole load of blackcurrant bushes. And most of this willow used to be the willow edging of the bed, and it rooted. But we're just letting it go now because it's just glorious. And I can take cuttings off the blackberry bushes and propagate them elsewhere. And this area will just be left to regenerate naturally. I've only planted two things in here and one of them died. So I'm leaving it now to regenerate naturally. In amongst the branches just there of the fallen tree, there is a little bush that I planted that's nicknamed the Lynn tree because I can't remember what the species is. It's of the rose family and it has pretty flowers, and that's all I can remember. I'm not very good at pretties. And it survived because the branches fell around it. Whether it still survives once the tree drops, I don't know. But I'm not going to plant any more in here. This will be left to naturally regenerate. It may have a little bit of judicious pruning done. And those big conifers, there's three of them. You can actually make out there are three. There you go, you can see now there are three separate conifer trunks. And they may well come down, but the birch in front of them and the alders will be left to do their own thing. And the camera foreshortens how close we are to the cottage actually, because between the cottage and the edge of this little woodland, there's about 15 metres, 45 foot maybe. And there's quite a bank down. So anything here is quite away from the cottage. And this little area will be left to regenerate with the local native trees. We've got one ash tree. That's the only ash tree that survived on this land when it was pillaged for fuel. And at the moment, all you see is the beauty of the winter's day, because we've had a fall of snow, as we often do at late January. But all of this is actually full of buttercups and daisies, and there's a little bit of rush in growth, but it's gradually doing its own thing, and we're just going to leave it to do it, because why wouldn't we? It's an area that can regenerate naturally and be a natural woodland, because under here, under all these tufts and lumps and bumps, we know there is rubbish, a lot of rubbish. When we first bought the place, we could clearly see plastic paint pots and bottoms of shoes and bits of old handbags and heaven knows what else. But nature has covered it over and continues to cover it, and we're just going to leave it. So this is the fairy wood.